welcome to my channel. I am the Bloody Baroness, and this is Eerieechoes. I found myself at home one weekend. My parents were out of town and I was returning from a cancelled sleepover at a friend's house. The lights were on and I got in the door and I remembered getting a phone call from that same friend shortly thereafter, which would end up being the last normal event of the night. My brother was playing video games in the next room and I could hear him tapping furiously at a video game while I spoke on the caller's phone. I walked around in the living room and ended the phone call in the kitchen when I remember hearing some kind of high-pitched squeal that came from the house somewhere, and I couldn't place it. I couldn't place where it was coming from. As it sounded the same in every room, I went to investigate. It ended after about a minute and was interrupted by the phone ringing, but the phone was not in the kitchen where I left it. It was in the bathroom, on the counter in front of the sink. I answered the phone and there was nobody there, so I hung up. It was at this point where I heard a dragging sound, like a very heavy object was being dragged in the attic crawl space above me. I followed the sound as it was slowly navigated from room to room and ended up in my parents' bedroom, who still had a waterbed. After the sound made it to the far wall, it stopped and the phone rang again. This time, it was my friend on the other end of it. I told him what was going on and he told me to be careful and call the police. After I got off the phone, I laid down on the waterbed and was horrified to find a body-shaped solid object inside the waterbed mattress, and I leaped out. I then heard a knock at the door and answered it quickly, but there was no one there. It was at this point when my brother called me from his room to check something out he had just discovered in the game he was playing, and a little more than annoyed at his lack of interest in what was going on, I stormed into his room. There was nobody there. His bed was made and the room spotless. Neither the console nor the TV was on, and the controller was wrapped and unplugged. There was no way he could have hid and cleaned his room in a few seconds it took me to make it to the front door of his room. I had been alone the entire night, hearing for 20 minutes straight my brother playing a game that was not present. I'd been alone the entire night, hearing for 20 straight minutes my brother playing a game that he was not present to be playing. The phone rang again, but again, it was not where I left it. This time, it was resting on the kitchen counter where I originally had left it. So I walked through the entire house to answer it. It was my friend calling again, this time saying the call was dropped for some reason and he was calling me back. I explained what just happened and there was another knock at the door. Since I was standing right next to it, I peeked out the window within 2 seconds of the knocks and there was nobody there. At this point, I opened the door and stepped onto the porch to make sure I didn't see anyone running away. I had a large wide open yard and there wasn't anything to hide behind. I walked into the yard to look around but didn't find anything. I found myself engaged in several more minutes of talking before my friend got off the line. It was at that moment where I realized that the place I had been staring off into space while talking were two very large black reflective eyes looking back at me. The figure was tall and lanky and stood only 10 feet or so from me, in the shadow cast from the front door light. The most notable feature he wore was an inhumanly large smile, and he was grinning with oily, metallic teeth, literally from ear to ear. Despite me staring directly at him for more than 5 minutes, I pretended I did not notice him, and through willpower alone, made it inside the house without running as fast as I could and instead walked calmly. I remember feeling like if I ran, he would chase me, and somehow knew that he would have caught me easily. I barricaded myself in my room the rest of the night and did not fall asleep until the sun came up the next morning and my parents were home. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before that, and nothing like that has happened since.